Dragons Dogma 2 annoys the hell out of me, and it's because it's so good. Due to the fact that both DD2 and Rise of Ronin will be released on March 22nd, 2024, I'm currently experiencing a conflicting feeling. See, in the beginning, I was certain that I'd begin Rise of Ronin first, but now I'm not so sure about that expectation. And this is due to the fact that I was recently invited to Capcom's offices in LA to receive some early hands-on time with Dragons Dogma 2, and I came away from that play session feeling really impressed. But first, allow me to set the stage. Context matters, so understand before I break down what I played, know that the time that I played this game was very limited. About 2.5 hours is the amount of time that Capcom gave me to play Dragons Dogma 2. We played on a PS5, and they gave us access to 2 different classes. One of those classes was the Mystic Spearhand, and the other was the Archer. I got approximately 1 hour and some change to play both of these classes. Just know that I won't be discussing any portions of the story, and there are multiple reasons for this decision. To begin, I wouldn't spoil things for you even if I had the ability to do so, and the second reason is that, well, I'm not able to spoil things even if I wanted to.
What you talking about, Willis?
I'm referring to the fact that after I arrived at the Capcom's offices, we did the typical meet and greet, I signed a non-disclosure agreement, and then they seated me at a PS5 where I was allowed to play. There was no context for anything other than the fact that this build that I played was very close to the final build of Dragons Dogma 2. After being loaded into the open world, I was instructed to have a good time. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to report back to you that I did in fact have a good time.
Fuck! I'm having fun!
That good time is the subject that I tend to concentrate on with this video. See, back in 2012 when the original Dragons Dogma was released, I was a fan of it. However, it's been 12 years. That is a significant amount of time, and one of the things this play session did was rekindle my passion for this franchise. Due to the fact that I frequently pause the game in order to take notes, I have a lot to discuss with y'all. I also asked you, the viewer, via Twitter in the community tab, what were some of your questions you had about Dragons Dogma 2, so make sure you stay to the very end because I'll do my best to address some of those questions. The first thing I want to touch on is the open world. For those of you unaware, this is another massive open world game, but I want to specifically touch on a quote given by one of the game's lead designers in regards to the open world design. And I apologize for butchering your name, but Hideki Itsuno goes on to say, just give it a try. Travel's boring? That's not true. It's only an issue because your game is boring. All you have to do is make travel fun. That's why you place things in the right location for players to discover, or come up with enemy appearance methods that create different experiences each time, or force players into blind situations where they don't know whether it's safe or not 10 meters in front of them. Now, my initial response to this quote was not favorable. I said on Twitter, that's an L take. I get where he's coming from, but the average gamer is 35 plus years old, where responsibilities and sometimes getting lost in a 100-hour game ain't an option. Fast travel should remain a staple in gaming. And many of you echoed the same sentiment judging by the responses to this tweet. However, after playing the game, I would like to make 2 observations. With regard to the point I made on Twitter, I stand on what I initially said, but I must admit that after playing Dragons Dogma 2, I have a greater understanding of where he's coming from. See, despite the fact that DD2 is a vast open world single player game, it manages to avoid this limitation by providing the player with something to do at all times. One of the biggest problems with open world games is that a significant number of them are devoid of content. And considering that, the open world often does not contribute anything to the player or their experience. It frequently feels like the developers are just trying to pad their game. This does not appear to be the case with Dragons Dogma 2, at least not during the period that I had the opportunity to play the game. See, due to the fact that they dropped us in the middle of the game, I had no idea what was going on in the main story, and truth be told, I didn't care. Even though I was just strolling about, I came across a lot of interesting things to do and see, and because of that, Dragons Dogma 2 gave me the same sensation I had while exploring the world of Elden Ring for the first time.
That's a bold statement.
It is, and I stand on it. I'm not saying this will be as good or better than Elden Ring, but I am feeling optimistic about this game before its release. With a span of just 2 hours, exploring resulted in a wonderful number of interactions. Here's a few examples. As I was running through the grasslands, I came across a fight between a big cyclops and a griffin, which I witnessed. While they fought, I stood back. This fight, it reminded me of like Godzilla versus King Kong. After some time, the griffin was winning the fight and he was getting close to killing the cyclops, so the crew and I jumped into the center of the fight. We ended up stealing a kill from the griffin, and then we fought the griffin, which resulted in me gaining an incredible amount of XP for both of those kills. Now, I was able to record it all. It was really cool. I wish you could see it, but my footage unfortunately got corrupted, so unfortunately, you're just gonna have to enjoy this B-roll and take my word for it. That was a big thing that I saw. A smaller example would be the crew and I were traveling, right? We come across a dark cave and we have to pass through it to get to our next objective. We walk into the cave and midway through, I step on a trap. The cave lights up and now we're getting jumped by a group of bandits. I love stuff like this because the game then forces the player to stay on their toes. Moving on to combat, as mentioned earlier, I got to play the Mystic Spear and the Archer classes. In my opinion, the combat in this game is comparable to that of the Final Fantasy VII remakes. Even though it is an action action game, you won't be able to mash buttons in Dragon's Dogma 2. When it comes to the fighting, there's a flow to things that the player must master, otherwise you'll be punished for not dodging. You have access to a wide range of unique powers that can be utilized, and your stamina meter ensures that you aren't spamming them. The best way I describe the stamina meter is, I say it felt balanced, which means that you'll have a lot of opportunities to use your abilities, but don't expect to be a god. And this all stems from the fact that what I've seen is, it's impossible to go completely berserk without becoming exhausted. Although alternatively, I thought about this and it's possible that the stamina won't be a problem at all. See, I was provided with a pre-made character and I wasn't allowed to experiment with the skill tree, so I'm not 100% sure on the role that stamina will play in the combat. What I can tell you is that one of the best parts of Dragon's Dogma 2 is how you eliminate some of these legendary mythical beasts. As soon as you stun an enemy, they become accessible for climbing, and if you want to know the truth, climbing on top of an enemy and stabbing them to death is more enjoyable than ever. Exhilarating is the word. This game does a great job of making you feel like a total badass, while also still making you feel like a mortal when you're climbing on top of these beasts, the way you're swaying and swinging left and right while you're stabbing them in the back. I mean, there's just nothing else on the market that's comparable to this mechanic, and it's even more impressive in Dragon's Dogma 2 than the first game. In regards to the Mystic Spear, they have the feel of a conventional spear type character all the way through, but they also have some flamboyant swinging moves that reminded me of Donatello from TMNT. The distinction is that they also use magic to enhance their combat moves. This class has an ability that allows him to charge at an adversary, and it's the fact you can utilize this leap into the air and engage in combat with enemies that can fly that I found this move to be particularly helpful. This was a class that I enjoyed, but I had the impression I was gonna enjoy it before I even played it, so it didn't have as much of an effect on me. Now, the Archer class, that was something that did take me by surprise. I was concerned that this class might be dull, but I'm relieved to say that it's not even close to being boring. This Archer is not your typical one, rather it's a magic archer. There were a ton of abilities that he had, but there were two cool powers that struck out to me that this class possessed. It is possible to fire an arrow that slows down time, explodes upon impact, and it allows you to direct it throughout its whole flight in the air. When dealing with mobs, this proved to be very useful. The Archer also possesses the ability to shoot ricochet arrows, which is also another dope talent. First off, it fires arrows like a machine gun, but what's more important is that the arrows are being reflected off of the walls. The crew and I were exploring when I came across a cave, and that was the moment that convinced me I might have to run the Archer when the full game comes out. I was able to locate a treasure chest while exploring in the cave, and immediately after I opened the chest, a gigantic goblin ripped through the wall and began swinging on me and the team. When I was on the verge of panicking, I suddenly recalled that I had the ricochet arrow and I hadn't tried it out yet. So I pulled it out and I fired what was like 50 arrows, but they continued bouncing off the wall. So imagine like 50 arrows, bright purple energy beams just bouncing off the wall. Yeah, that goblin, to make a long story short, he got his ass tore up.
Pause.
Having that opportunity to make that cool experience happen, it just left me sitting there like, damn, I might want to run this class for my full playthrough. If you use your imagination, I promise you the Archer will not be a problem playing in this game. And complementing the amazing combat is the top-notch music in this game. The music in this game definitely made me sit up in my chair and concentrate on the fight. So if you're a fan of orchestras that are well-timed, you should absolutely check out this game. I felt it was vital to take the time to let y'all know that the music in this game is really incredible, because music is such an important instrument for games and generating moods that I feel like is frequently overlooked. That being said, not all is sunshine and farts. I do have some negative takeaways from my time with this game. The first being that there's no lock-on for the camera. This was a bit frustrating at first, especially considering enemies tend to be wild and aggressive, so you constantly have to disengage in combat to swing the camera around. A lock-on feature also would have been nice for the larger enemies, so I knew what exactly I was targeting when I was trying to be intentional about my offense. Now, eventually I was able to adapt to this lack of lock-on feature, but do know it might frustrate some of y'all early on in your playthrough. During conversations, mouth movements were not the best. Rarely was a character's mouth in sync with what they were saying. For me, this isn't a deal breaker, but it wasn't subtle. It was very noticeable, and I'm just trying to be objective about what I think could be cleaned up before launch. As for the frame rate, I know many of you are curious of what this game is running at, and honestly, I didn't know this game was rumored to be running at 30 FPS before playing, so I didn't get to ask the PR team when I was there. I only found out about the 30 FPS rumors after asking what y'all wanted to know on Twitter. But I will say, for playing it, it didn't feel like 60 FPS, but it also didn't feel like 30. I honestly couldn't tell. I wasn't paying that much attention to the frame rate, seeing as my time was limited. What I can say is that I didn't experience any frame drops or weird stuttering, but I also wouldn't be shocked if this game was locked at 30 FPS or using some type of dynamic resolution frame rate. And the reason being is the scale of this game is large, and it looks much better on a monitor on YouTube. With the large scale of the fights and the impressive visuals and the fast fast-paced action. I wouldn't be shocked if this game is locked at 30 on console. The scope of everything seems like it might push the hardware to its limits, but I can't give a definitive answer on that one, so my apologies on that. What I can say is that I enjoyed what I played, and I'm looking forward to the full release of Dragons Dogma 2. This is definitely a day one purchase for me, so you can do what you want with that info. While you figure out what to do with that info, I'm gonna tap into the community. As mentioned earlier, I asked on Twitter in the community tab, what questions do you have about Dragons Dogma 2 before the release? And the ones I was capable of answering go as followed. HatGuy22 says, how many dragons are in the game and how much screen time do they get? So like I said earlier, if you were paying attention, I only got 2 hours to play the game. There's no way for me to answer how many dragons are in the game. What I can tell you is, in my 2 hours of playing the game, just exploring, I ran into 2 different dragons, one in the day and then one at night. I ran into several griffins, Peter Griffin. I didn't run into Peter Griffin. I ran into that Cyclops. I ran into a bunch of giant goblins. I ran into tons of mythical creatures. I can't tell you how many dragons are in the game, but what I can tell you is there's plenty of big ass shit to fight. Trust me. Ahmad asks, will stamina be unlimited outside of combat? Now, I can't give you a definitive answer because I'm not a developer. I can only tell you what I played, but I'm about 95% sure that stamina is unlimited outside of combat, because when I was playing, I noticed I only got tired during fights, but when I was just running around in the world, I never got tired. So I'm pretty sure stamina is unlimited outside of combat when you're exploring. You should be good, but don't take that with a grain of salt. Don't quote me on that. Don't get mad if I'm wrong. Nick asked, how does it run on console? As I mentioned in the video, I played on the PS5, and as mentioned earlier, I did not experience any type of frame drops. The game seemed to run pretty well. Overall, I would rate my experience as a good time. I didn't have any technical issues, but then keep in mind, I was playing a vertical slice. Quick story, I was one of the people that got to play an early vertical slice of Mass Effect Andromeda, and that vertical slice that we got to play, it was 2 hours. It was fucking flawless. So then I did a preview video similar to this one, and I think the title of the video was like 5 reasons I'm excited about Mass Effect Andromeda. Long story short, I talked about what I liked about what I played, because I can't stress enough that build was good. It was a this is why they call them vertical slices. They be polishing the stuff up. I say that to say this. The full game came out. You saw what happened with Mass Effect Andromeda. Long story short, I caught a lot of flack, and I learned a hard lesson about that. Always say you played a vertical slice. Don't oversell on anything. That's why I try to take everything I say with a grain of salt. What I played, it ran fine. But when the full game comes out, I cannot speak on that. I can only speak on what I played. So take it with a grain of salt, because it might be a setup, and I'm not getting set up to look stupid anymore. King Godzilla asks,
is the bikini armor returning in Dragon Dogma 2?
bro, get the fuck out of here. Bonk, you go to horny jail. Antihero asks, with no fast travel, how will they keep players engaged during travel? As I mentioned earlier, there is tons of things you're going to run into, tons of different mythical creatures that you're going to be fighting, tons of like bandits and other NPCs you're going to fight, but also what I didn't mention in the video earlier. So like for those of you who haven't played Dragons Dogma 2, there's a pawn system in the game. Basically, they call them pawns, but in the game, the main character, you're referred to as master. I think they just call them pawns as like a politically correct, they're slaves. Okay. Well, no, they're more like indentured servants. They're more like indentured servants, right? Because I think you do have to pay them for their services, but they work extra hard and extra long hours for you. So yeah, they're not slaves, but they're indentured servants. They're somewhere in the middle. All throughout my experience, I ran into like people just walking around, whether it was in the towns or even in the open areas. I would like random people, and like they would talk to you, and like a stat sheet would pull up, and it tells you what their strengths and weaknesses, and you could hire them and bring them onto the team. You can hire like new pawns and dismiss old pawns. So I thought that was a really cool system. That kept me engaged. Mr. Happy Bad Time says, what improvements were made to the pawn system? I kind of answered the question in the last one with Antihero, but just in case you weren't listening. Yeah, like you're gonna find random people all the time, whether you're exploring in the open fields or all throughout the city. And like now when you talk to somebody, they have more, I'll say this, they have more personality. They also give you tips and hints on how to engage in combat. They'll suggest different types of improvements for like your gear and stuff like that. It just seems like they're more alive, basically. They're more helpful. They're not just following you around for no reason. And the fact that you constantly are running into new different types of people, I thought that was really cool. And last but not least, Retro Polo says, not a question, but more of a statement, make it free. And to that I say, Retro, no. People have bills to pay, so you're gonna have to compensate these hardworking developers for their work. That being said, since you are broke and in need of some free entertainment, why not check out another video of mine? It's totally free to click the card on the screen right now. That card will take you to my previous video of me poking fun at Helldivers 2.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?